lovely to be here with you all and to get to know Casamia a little bit. I've seen it from Instagram, so it's nice to meet you teachers and just see the environment. It's so lovely here. So thank you so much for having us. Today we're going to talk about going from frustration to connection. How many of us have felt frustrated with a child? Maybe everyone, I think, because there's a lot going on, right? There's a lot going on in us. There's a lot happening, especially with young children. Here, you guys are working with children from, come on in. Yeah, you guys are working with very young children, toddlers, preschoolers. This age, there's so much going on, so much happening in the brain. And so it's a lot sometimes. But I would love to talk about how to foster an environment of cooperation. I do gear this a lot towards parenting, but we'll also talk about what that looks like in the classroom, because that is so important, right? And it is a bit different in parenting. We maybe have a few kids that we're managing at once in a classroom. We have multiple children at the same time. And so there are a lot of things that are going to overlap, and then there'll be some things that are specific to one or the other. So today, what we'll focus on, we talk about our purpose, building that connection, and also building our own confidence. I think sometimes there can be so much information out there when it comes to parenting, when it comes to discipline, when it comes to classroom management. And sometimes that overload of information can make us feel insecure or overwhelmed or confused about how we should actually handle a situation or how we should interact with a child. And so I'm hoping to, in this time, give some confidence, and that welcome is blocking that confident piece. So I think that's a really big part of both parenting and teaching in the classroom. So we're going to talk about we're going to have three segments. The first segment is going to be about brain development and understanding what's happening in our child's brain or our student's brain, and how that affects behavior. And then the second thing we're going to talk about is the nervous system and how our nervous systems communicate and how we can regulate our own nervous system so that we can co-regulate with our children and students. And this is a key piece of the puzzle when it comes to fostering that cooperation and when it comes to adjusting behavior. The third thing we're going to talk about is effective communication and boundaries. And so we're specifically going to look at how our values for our classroom or in our family if we have those defined, that can really help us determine what kind of boundaries we set. And then we're going to talk about how to hold boundaries. So my goal is that you each would feel empowered in your parenting and in your teaching and caregiving and classroom management, that you would feel connected with your children and with your students, and that you would feel confident in your parenting and classroom management. So a little bit about me. My name is Kayla, and I'm a certified parenting coach. I'm certified through Jai Institute for Parenting. I also have specialized training in trauma-informed classrooms, resilience in children, social emotional learning, and somatic therapy. I am currently learning under Dr. Dan Siegel, who is a renowned author and speaker. He wrote books like The Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline, as well as dozens of other books and many academic books that they use in universities. So we're going to talk a lot about ideas from Dr. Dan Siegel. I also I have the 0 to 3 certificate from AMI. And I have a background in education. So I have a background in the classroom, and I also co-founded 2 schools in Lebanon for elementary children. And those continue to educate 350 to 400 students a year. And those schools are particularly serving vulnerable refugee communities in Lebanon. I'm also a partner with Montessori for Lebanon, which is an AMI affiliate. AMI is the Association Montessori Internationale in Europe. And so we have partnered together to make resources more available in Lebanon. And we talked about, I'm an educator, a coach. I'm also a parent. I have 2 children. I have 2 little girls. My older daughter is almost 6, and my youngest daughter just turned 4. And they're such a joy. And also, you know, it's hard. So I'm right there with you in the trenches. So that's a little bit about me. And we'll go ahead and get started. So in this first segment, I'm sorry, I'm realizing the font is probably not big enough and maybe a little hard to read, but we're gonna go into that brain development and why and how it affects behavior. And how we can respond in a way that is actually effective. So Dr. Dan Siegel talks about the upstairs and the downstairs brain. And this gives us insight into why our children sometimes have a really hard time listening or following instructions. And why they maybe sometimes have a hard time managing emotions and having very big emotions. Oh, it's a bummer that it's it's not showing up right, but that's okay. So Dr. Dan Siegel talks about the brain, and it's probably a little bit hard to see this picture, but he talks about the brain like a house with 2 main parts. There's an upstairs and a downstairs part. So the downstairs brain includes the limbic system, which includes the amygdala. And the amygdala is responsible for specifically for emotions like anger and fear. This is where our primal emotions kind of come into play, reactions to things instead of and this is for our survival. So if there was a lion, we don't need to think about all of our options in that moment. We don't need to take a minute and pause and reflect and figure out and decide and plan what to do next. No, we just need to react. If there's a lion in front of us, our bodies need to, in a split second, get to safety. And so that downstairs brain is the part of the brain that is responding to it's that survival part of the brain. It's responding to threat in front of us. And we'll talk about the nervous system and go into more of that. But this helps us to react very quickly to what is happening in front of us. And this links with our stress responses, the fight, flight, or freeze, which we'll talk more about that later. But think of the downstairs brain as that's housing our emotions, that's housing our immediate reactions to things. Now the upstairs brain includes our prefrontal cortex, which is talking about these complex functions like reasoning, problem solving, thinking, planning, and impulse control. So it's our upstairs brain that is going to, when there's a problem in front of us, really think through, what are my options here? What are all the things that need to be done, and how do I do them? How do I solve this problem? So it also is responsible for empathy, being able to understand how someone else is feeling, how someone else is experiencing a situation. And so what we need to know about this is that children are pretty much born with a fully developed downstairs brain. That means they have access to all their emotions pretty much right away. So that's why, I mean, I think if we, think of a baby, it's very easy to see when they're upset. They communicate that very well. Whereas the upstairs brain isn't fully developed until mid-20s. So when we're talking about children, they're living in their downstairs brain. That reasoning, that problem solving, that impulse control, that emotion regulation is not accessible most of the time. And I think that really explains a lot when we look at small children. So the ability to be able to control emotions, to regulate emotions, is not accessible, especially for very, very young children. So a great way to kind of think about this, Dr. Dan Siegel uses the hand model of the brain. And so this area would be the prefrontal cortex. This is the limbic system here with the amygdala in there. And then here's the brainstem and the spinal cord, which is connecting the nervous system. And so, so we won't go into this a ton today, but you can see that the prefrontal cortex is right here over the limbic system. And so what we want to do as parents, as caregivers, as educators, we want to help our children to be able to access their upstairs brain, to be able to connect that downstairs brain to that upstairs brain, so that they can start learning to regulate those emotions, to problem solve, but realizing that it is a process and our expectations need to be way down here. But it is our responsibility to teach these things. And one of the best teachers is modeling. And so we get to model those things. We get to model impulse control and emotion regulation, and model pausing before we react and regulating ourselves, so that our child can learn how to do that as well. So the so with the hand model, one thing I just want to point out is this isn't just for our children, this is for us as well. And there's a concept that Dr. Dan Siegel calls flipping the lid. And it is basically when even us as adults, our upstairs brain becomes inaccessible because we are overridden with emotion. And so it's our responsibility as well to work on that integration in us. And so I want us to think of a time, and we don't have to, say it out loud. And you can even think of someone else maybe that but when you were experiencing a lot of stress, or you were really angry, or maybe even really afraid, and you just reacted without being able to think through how you wanted to respond. It was just an immediate reaction. And so this can happen in situations like you're with your child and well, I guess particularly this flipping the lid, there's maybe a lot of stress at work, or you just had a hard conversation, and maybe your child starts to whine, and that is just so grating, and they're whining and they're whining, and you just can't take it anymore, and you maybe snap, maybe yell, maybe say something that wasn't coming from a place of calm. And maybe, several, minutes later or an hour later, you're like, oh, I wish I didn't do that. That's an example of us, how we as adults can flip our lid, can become overridden by the limbic system and not be able to access that thinking part of our brain. And so I think it's just if we know that even as adults, we have trouble not reacting to something. If we know that we sometimes can't think clearly, I think it's really helpful to know that sometimes our children aren't going to be able to think clearly either. We have developed upstairs brains. We have the ability to access our impulse control and emotion regulation and logical thinking, but even sometimes we can't. And so how much more our children who it's not even developed. And I think, okay. So I'm going to go into a little bit more about the ages and where that development is at. So a key point is that when our child flips their lid and their upstairs brain isn't accessible, they cannot hear instructions. They cannot access reasoning. They're not going to be able to follow directions and listen to what you're saying. And so they need us to help them connect and bring that upstairs brain back online first before any instructions are given. And so they need that help to calm down, to connect with us, to connect with themselves, to feel what they're feeling so that they can access that thinking part of their brain. So a little bit about where children are at in different ages. I know the majority of you guys are working with very young children. So For children up to 3, like we talked about, the downstairs brain is mostly developed at birth. And so for the majority of the time they're living there, they're, as they're starting to reach those, the age of 2, 3, they are just beginning to understand what that impulse control looks like. So, an author that I really appreciate her work, Dr. Mona Delahooke, she wrote a really great book called Beyond Behaviors, but she says that about 56% of parents believe that toddlers should be able to control their impulses before the age of 3. But typically this isn't accessible until at least 3.5, 4. And so when we look at between the ages of 3 and 7, children are, again, they're beginning to get some of that, especially if they've had good models, especially if they're being given tools that they can go to for that nervous system regulation, for that emotion regulation. But they're still going to heavily rely on co-regulation. They're still going to heavily rely on you as the caregiver for that nervous system to nervous system regulation, your calm, your ability to be regulated. And then 7 and up, we're going to start to see that maturity. We're going to start to see that ability to make wise decisions, and start to plan. We're going to be starting to see that empathy again if it's been modeled for them. But again, like we talked about, the upstairs brain is not fully developed until the mid-20s. So this is going to be a process for many, many, many years. So I want to just take a minute and think of a recent situation where a child, maybe your child or a child in your care, was upset. Maybe it was during some kind of transition. Maybe they were overtired. But a time where they were obviously in their downstairs brain. They were reacting, and they didn't have access to that emotion regulation. So I want you just to think through, in that situation, what were the child's behaviors and emotions that you saw that show you that they flipped their lid? Maybe if you can recall a situation, maybe you don't have to explain the whole situation, but tell me, what were some of those behaviors that you saw that you're like, oh yeah, they flipped their lid, they didn't have access to that thinking part of the brain?
Yeah, my daughter, not gonna explain a lot, but the reaction was that she started crying all of a sudden and didn't stop until after we stopped talking, the adults stopped talking, and we went on our knees and just waited for her to calm down.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, can anyone else think of something? Think of some behaviors or emotions that you saw that tell you, oh yeah, that child had flipped their lid.
My son sometimes doesn't want to sleep, and then he starts crying, and then at some point I know that he won't stop crying, it will only increase. Unless we go out of the room and do something else to calm him down, and then give it another try.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of the same. If they don't get what they want, my kids, they flip their lid.
Yep.
Like, and this is the moment where, okay, what do I do now?
Yep.
How do I handle this when I'm stressed? And they're stressing me even more so.
Yeah.
And when they flip the lid, it's like, no, it's like they black out. I want it now. No, I want it. Some days are good. They're like, okay, mama. And some days they're like, no. I want what she has, and she wants what he has, so, yeah.
The life of a parent.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And you asked a really great question. What do I do now?
Yeah.
Right? Key question. So we are gonna talk about that. And yeah, we will get into that. So the next question, and as we continue, I think it'll become more clear. But maybe just think, like, how might you adjust your response now, knowing that children don't have access to thinking, reasoning, decision-making, impulse control, and emotion regulation? What might, and maybe in that particular situation that you thought of, how might you respond differently? So we'll keep going. So takeaway, our children's behaviors often signal their brain development and their abilities based on their age and based on their development, especially during moments of stress and de-stress. And so recognizing when they're in their downstairs brain can help us to pause and connect one with ourselves, and then connect with our child, and find that path to integration or to connection between that downstairs brain to that upstairs brain. And so this can help us really adjust our own expectations of our children. And so this shift is the first shift in fostering that cooperation. And so we'll go into segment 2. And this is about regulating our nervous systems in order to co-regulate with our child. So we're going to talk about a really important framework. We're going to talk about the polyvagal theory. Thank you so much. Which was created by Dr. Stephen Porges. And we're going to go into what the nervous system is and why it is so important for understanding our reactions and our children's. So there are 3 states to the nervous system. And I just want to first start out with, and we talked a little bit about development, and this came off. Sorry. Okay, keep going. Okay. So we talked a little bit about these like primal reactions that are so important for our survival. If we're walking in the street and all of a sudden a car turns the corner, we need to be able to react quickly and not get hit by the car. And, you know, obviously going back to that lion, right? This is something that, as you know, in the past, we needed so much more, right? There was, and there still is danger. We need to be able to react. And so we can appreciate that about our nervous system, that its job is to protect us, to keep us safe, to keep us alive. Also, we can identify cues of threat that are not really threatening. So our nervous system can pick up threat from people, from the environment, that maybe isn't actually threatening. And, you know, some examples of that are if we walk into the room and we maybe just had a difficult conversation, or we're stressed about something, and our spouse gives us a tone or a look, or just doesn't say the right thing. And we can feel that in our body, and we can feel the tension, and we want to fight. Maybe not physically, but maybe with words, which can be just as powerful. So when we look at the states of the nervous system, this green is what Dr. Stephen Porges calls the ventral vagal state. This is when we feel safe. This is when we, he also calls it the social engagement state. This is when we can connect, when we're open. This is when we feel that calm, when we feel grounded. We can approach things with compassion, with openness, with curiosity. So this is the parasympathetic nervous system. If we're talking about the autonomic nervous system, this is the parasympathetic branch. This is where we, and then if we relate that back to the brain, in that calm, connected, engaged, safe place, we are able to access that upstairs brain. We're also able to think through things and control our emotions and respond in a way that makes sense for the situation. So the second state is that fight or flight state. That's the sympathetic nervous system. And that's where we start seeing frustration, irritation, anger, rage. That's when we start seeing the worry, then the anxiety, the fear, the panic. And so this is where we go into what they call hyperarousal. Our body recognizes that something isn't right, whether it's a tone or a look or our child's throwing a tantrum, and we want to go into that stop it, fight, or maybe it's flight, and maybe it's I just can't do this anymore. I'm going into the other room. I can't handle it. Like, get me out of here. This is too much. And so this is when we're sensing danger. So if we're talking about safety, we're feeling safe and right. So when we're feeling some sort of danger, however, again, it's perceived danger, felt danger. So everything might be fine and safe, but we can pick up cues of danger. And, you know, a lot of this, a lot of our own childhood experiences play into what kinds of things that we see as safe versus dangerous. And so, for example, if as a child, I was never allowed to cry, and I was sent to my room if I was crying, or maybe it was an angry reaction to squash the crying. Now, as an adult, if I haven't worked through my own stuff, made sense of my own past, when my child is crying, that might feel really unsafe. That might physically feel like there is danger and this is not okay. So that's where maybe you see in yourself or others that irritation, that anger, or maybe it's the fear, panic, I need to get out of here response, depending on how you're viewing that danger. So then the third state is the shutdown state. So this is the hypoarousal. This is the helplessness, the numbness, the shutdown, the disassociation. This is in the, you know, in the animal worlds, there are certain animals like opossums who, when they feel danger, they actually just play dead and freeze. And sometimes we can do the same thing. It just gets too much. Our nervous system gets too, you know, aroused, it's too much for us to handle. And maybe it's the middle of the day, but we just crawl into bed, and that's all we can do. It's that shutdown place. So for our children, that could look like going silent, going into their room, not wanting to talk, not wanting to be around anyone. And so if we're looking at this green area, this is that social engagement, that ability to connect with people, that ability to have those deep relationships. So these two would be the opposite of that inability to connect and engage, that inability to be in relationship. So we are constantly, as human beings, scanning the environment and looking for cues of safety or cues of danger. And so when we perceive safety, we're able to relax. We're able to engage. We're able to think and learn. That hasn't been a word that I've used, but that upstairs brain is where the learning happens. So if us or a child is flipping their lid, they can't learn. So for us teachers, that's so important for us to understand. A child cannot learn if they don't have access to their upstairs brain. And if they're in fight or flight or freeze, they don't have access to their upstairs brain. So in an environment where a child does not perceive safety, right? This is all about perception and how each of us interprets safety versus danger. And so if a child doesn't perceive that safety, or if they're in one of these two states, they can't learn. So when we also perceive danger, we're gonna be more prone to react and to be defensive. So this is this is where this becomes applicable for us as parents and caregivers and teachers. It's all about, like, we're constantly scanning the environment, looking for cues of safety, looking for cues of danger. So it's our job as the caregiver to be sending cues of safety. And once we're aware of this, we can realize that actually there can be a lot of ways that we send cues of danger without even realizing it. So I won't go super into the vagus nerve, but the vagus nerve is controlling a lot of our facial expressions. And so when we're talking about body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, our presence, our being in the world, communicating safety looks like bringing awareness to our eyes and our eyebrows, bringing awareness to our mouths. If my mouth is like this and my eyes are like this, that is a cue of danger. If I can relax my face and bring softness around my eyes, if I can adjust my tone of voice, and so with children, a lot of times that melodic tone of voice can communicate that safety. And so if we're talking fast, talking loud, talking very sternly, okay, we're communicating without even maybe realizing it, cues of danger. But if we can just bring attention to our tone of voice, to these cues, and be intentional about communicating those cues of safety, then that can actually do a lot of the work for us. And so you can see how our nervous systems are always communicating to each other. I don't know if you can think of a time when this has happened, but have you ever felt really stressed out and you haven't said anything, like you're just feeling it inside, and it could be a situation with family, work, whatever it is, you're feeling really stressed. And for those of you with children, your child walks in the room and for no reason, they just lose it. Like they're in there for a minute and they're able to pick up the stress without you telling them, without them knowing anything about the situation. But all of a sudden they're mirroring your stress, your fight or flight state, your agitation with another situation, but all of a sudden now they're feeling it. So it's really important to know that our nervous systems are always communicating. And so being intentional about these things is really important. So a key point here is that felt safety encourages cooperation and connection. It encourages that cooperative behavior. And as children feel safe in their nervous systems, as they feel safe in the environment and with you, they will be able to, you will see that in their behavior. as children feel a sense of safety, you will see that play out in how they behave. And so that is co-regulation. Okay. So co-regulation is our nervous systems communicating. I'm regulating myself. And because I'm regulated and I'm able to calm my nervous system, my child is able to calm theirs. And so we're gonna talk about some practices for calming our own nervous systems. And this takes a lot of practice because it is, so we talked about the brain flipping our lid, we talked about the nervous system. If we haven't practiced pausing, it's really hard to pause before we overreact to situations. And so, one, it's really hard to pause. Two, it's really hard to pause and do something we're not used to doing if we're triggered, if our nervous system is sensing danger, if we are in fight or flight. So we're going to go through a few practices to regulate our own nervous systems. And in order to be able to access these practices in the moment, it's really important to practice them and have them be an ongoing practice. And so even, making some of these things daily practices where you just, maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's in the evening before bed, picking something that resonates with you and practicing it in times when you're not in the moment, in times where you're not stressed, so that you can access it in times of stress. So if you feel comfortable, I'm going to invite you to just put a hand on your belly and a hand on your chest. And if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. And I want you just to bring attention to your breath. Maybe you feel it, feel the air coming in your nose and out your nose or your mouth. And maybe you can bring attention to your lungs filling up every time you take a breath in. And then releasing when you take a breath out. Belly breathing is a really helpful tool when you can expand your belly when you take a breath in. All of these things, the awareness of the breath and also taking that deep belly breath where you expand your belly out. All of these activate the parasympathetic nervous system, that green, that social engagement. So having a practice of one, bringing awareness to the breath, and then two, that deep belly breath. A lot of times we can get used to shallow breaths. And making sure that we're getting that deep belly breath really helps to bring us back into that social engagement, that parasympathetic nervous system. And so another thing that we can do that can be really helpful is hum. And so we're talking a little bit about the vagus nerve in the face. And the vagus nerve is really what plays into that polyvagal theory. It's a cranial nerve that it reaches into these areas of your face. It also goes down your spinal cord, all the way to your diaphragm. And so it's really involved in our whole systems. Humming is another practice that is activating that vagus nerve. And so and this might feel silly, I don't know if we're not used to doing it, but I'm going to invite you all, if you feel comfortable, just take a minute and we're just going to all hum, anyone that wants to. And I just want you to notice how that feels, the vibrations in your face, and then how that feels in your body after. So we can all just hum. I'm just gonna invite you to hum. Maybe you want to hum a song. Yeah, I'm curious if anyone wants to share. Did you notice anything? No. Okay, maybe that's one you can just nix, and that's one that you're like, no, I'm good. That one I'll hold. No, but I do just want to point something out. It's really interesting because my 4-year-old, she is a thumb sucker. So she sucks her thumb, which I'm totally okay with. Not everyone is okay with that. I'm okay with that. But what she'll do when she's upset is she'll stick her thumb in her mouth and she'll hum to herself. I did not teach her that. That is something that she intuitively goes to. But I love that, even with kids, we can actually see some of these things play out in an intuitive, this is what I need to do to comfort myself and help myself regulate kind of way. So hum if you feel like, or maybe, practice it a couple times and decide if that one's for you. So grounding practices can also be really helpful. One, physical grounding, like taking your shoes off, going outside, walking barefoot in the grass or in the dirt. It's extremely helpful for bringing that parasympathetic nervous system online, bringing us back to calm, bringing us back into that green. Also, just feeling with our senses what is around us in that current situation. So just bringing attention to, and you can even go step by step through each of the 5 senses and bringing attention to sight and the things that you see, and just bringing attention to that. Sometimes it's so easy to just get so used to our senses that we don't actually bring attention to each one individually. And so really bringing attention to that sight, bringing attention to our sense of hearing. What can we hear? And just taking a minute and just being able to identify and bring awareness to our sense of hearing, to our sense of touch. What surfaces are we coming in contact with? Maybe we feel our clothes, the fabric of our clothes on our arms, back, or the seat under us, or our hands touching our pants, or whatever it might be. Our sense of taste. What just bringing that awareness also helps bring that parasympathetic nervous system online. So practicing that can be extremely helpful. This is also a good one to do with kids. This can help bring them back down into that social engagement. So yeah, just take a moment and think about, we didn't really spend a ton of time on each one, but maybe just think about those different things that we talked about and maybe something that would be accessible to you. One that you might want to practice. You might want to take home and say, okay, I'm going to practice this every day, and I'm gonna make an intention of when I'm in the moment, triggered and feeling my body go into fight or flight. I'm gonna make an intention to pause and practice one of those. So we've talked about this a little bit already, but the impact of adult dysregulation on children. So children are highly sensitive to the emotional states of the adults around them. So when we're stressed, frustrated, or angry, they often mirror those states without even realizing it. I actually noticed that, or I'm starting to become aware that sometimes I don't even realize I'm angry until my daughter comes in and she starts reacting about something, and I'm like, oh, yep, she is mirroring what's going on in me, and I need to bring awareness to how I'm interacting in the world, and just connect with myself for a minute and think about why I'm angry or why I'm frustrated. So that can lead to cycles of dysregulation, right? I don't think I'm the only one that has been in that cycle of me feeling dysregulated, feeling angry, and then my daughter comes in and she's a mess. She's upset about something, and then I react to that and get more angry, and then my anger makes her lose it even more. And so we can see and maybe relate to how this is a cycle, but we can break it. So when we are actively practicing that nervous system regulation, when we are connecting with ourselves and bringing awareness to what's going on for us, and we're practicing exercises that ground us, that bring that parasympathetic nervous system back online, we're teaching our children how to navigate their emotions as well. And so, and going back to the nervous system state, when we're able to bring that parasympathetic nervous system back online, that green, and we're able to feel safe, and then we're able to communicate safety, and our child can feel that sense of safety, and then that is reflected in their behaviors. So, let's see. Okay, are there any questions about that? Is this, I'm curious if some of this is familiar, or if anything was maybe even confusing, or if something popped up like, hey, this is a situation, how does this work in this model? Any questions or thoughts?
Maybe I can relate to everything you saying. In everyday situations I'm facing with my daughter. Yes.
Okay.
It's really helpful.
Oh, good.
Some of these strategies sometimes like coming. But I didn't know it was a strategy to calm yourself. I just use it
That's great.
to entertain myself.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I hope that that it is, it is clear and making sense, and that it's also, 'cause there's sometimes some like, scientific wording when we're talking about the polyvagal theory and these kinds of things, but hopefully it's still really clear that this is just it's clear and it's applicable in everyday life, right? And simple. The fact that that's your go-to, I love that. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so moving on, and where are we at with time? Okay, so we're good on time. Okay, I'm curious if, okay, I'd love for you guys to just take a minute and think of a situation recently where your child was, or a student maybe, they were obviously dysregulated. And I want you to think about, and we kind of, thought about a situation earlier about when a child had flipped their lid. So maybe it's that same situation. But now with what we've talked about, how would you handle that situation? Just consider maybe for a minute. And if someone wants to share, if they have a situation where, if a situation comes to mind and you're like, this happened and now I think I would do things this way.
I wanted to ask you, how would I act when my child flips his lid and he doesn't want to hear anything because he's in that moment where he doesn't want to hear anything from me?
He
How would
can't,
I-
right?
Yeah, so he's still angry. Do I let him let it out? Stay calm, or do I talk to him? Okay, what's wrong? What do you feel? Or do I wait a few minutes? Like, what's the perfect, not perfect, but what's the right thing to do?
Yeah, such a good question. So if a child has flipped their lid and they don't have access to the thinking, reasoning part of the brain, do you think they're gonna be able to answer the question, what's wrong?
Yeah.
Like, they can't, right? That thinking part of the brain is what can even use words to identify, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm curious, how do you think you could use cues of safety in that moment? And actually focus on yourself. Like what do you think that could look like?
If I stay calm, the positive outcome on my side, me acting up won't help, of course, it's just gonna make it go crazy, especially when you have two kids and they're both doing the same thing at the same time. I think,
Yeah,
sometimes I feel like them letting it out is healthy and not reacting, just taking a few minutes. And then leaving it for you and stuff, and then reaching out to them. I think they'll be more calm
yeah,
in my experience,
yeah.
so,
I love that.
yeah.
And that the ability for them to be able to express their emotions, right? That's a cue of safety. you, like you said, you being able to be present, connect with yourself, not react to their behavior.
Telling them to stop screaming or stop it. you
Right.
know, or actually,
Right.
yes.
And so, yeah, I love the, us yelling,
Yeah,
telling them to stop yelling. Like, it does, it absolutely does. And, in those moments, we're modeling the yelling that we don't want them to, and it's just, and it just,
Chaos. Yeah.
yes, and it just evolves. And so really focusing on connecting with ourselves, because I think a lot of us, and I'll speak from my personal experience, I know that I did not have a safe place to express emotions as a child. I received many messages growing up, and I love my parents. They did an amazing job. They did the best that they know how to do, like we all are. So it's not about blame, but I heard the message that emotions are not acceptable. And so that being able to, okay, so what I learned from that was to shut down my own emotions. And now as an adult, I've personally had a really hard time even knowing what I'm feeling. And so,
showing emotion.
yeah. And so that's a whole learning process, being able to even know what I'm feeling at any given moment. Right. I mean, we have the obvious reactions that where everyone else can probably see what I'm feeling. But for me to be able to identify and be like, I'm feeling really angry, it took me a really long time to be able to say I'm angry and I'm anxious. I did not know I had anxiety for many years, actually, until like maybe 2 years ago. And I was like, oh, that's what that is when my chest gets tight and I can't breathe. I guess that makes sense. And so even being able to just tune in, what is happening for me right now? So another concept that, another phrase that Dr. Dan Siegel coined is name it to tame it. And it's this idea that when we can actually identify and put words to what's happening, it just brings down the intensity a bit. And so that's true for ourselves when we can say, I'm feeling really angry right now, or I'm feeling really anxious right now. It helps to just bring down the intensity. Whereas if we try to stuff it and try to ignore it and try to push it to the side and try not to think about it and try to just go on with our day, it actually bubbles up and overflows and explodes. And so in order to actually kind of bring down the intensity of what we're feeling, this helps for us and for our child, to be able to say, you're really upset right now. It seems like you're really angry about this. I see you, I see that you're angry. Just that piece of being able to identify and name what's happening can really help. Or even just, I'm feeling really dysregulated right now. Like I feel like I want to explode. And so there's a lot of ways to just to pause, connect with ourselves, back to, what we were talking about with your situation. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think you're right on track, right?
Perfect.
And just being able to be there, be that safe place, communicate that safety, be a safe place for emotions. So yeah, thanks. Okay. And this is gonna get even more practical. Hopefully. So this is the last segment, the third segment. This is effective communication and setting values-based boundaries. And so we're gonna focus on communicating clearly and respectfully in order to foster that cooperation. We're gonna talk about defining our values so that we know what to say yes and no to, so that we know where our boundaries are. And then we're gonna talk about holding boundaries in a way that's respectful, and in a way that is both firm and kind. So communicating effectively with children. So clarity is a really big piece of it, and I kind of just put everything up there and maybe should have broken it down, but so when we are able to communicate clearly in a calm, concise way, that allows children to be able to understand what we're even asking them to do in the first place or not to do. And so another really helpful way to be clear is telling them what they can do instead of only what they cannot do. And so I think oftentimes it's much easier to tell a child what they cannot do because they're probably doing it. And, you know, especially if it's an immediate, like running with scissors or, you know, playing with something breakable or playing with electrical outlets, like things like this, especially, you know, things that are safety related can often, it's just that immediate reaction from us as well, which completely makes sense. But what that can do when we're just telling a child what not to do is it brings back the focus on the unwanted behavior. And so instead of a child's understanding what to do, instead the focus is brought back on what they're doing that's not okay. So that can actually cause them to maybe not even hear the don't part, but just hear the focus on that behavior, if that makes sense. Whereas saying what to do actually gives them an option of doing something else. So if it's don't run with scissors, run with scissors is what they're hearing. They're hearing those words. But if we're like, if we say walk with scissors, walk, or, you know, or if it's hold the scissors with two hands or hold the scissors at however, you know, in the classroom, the children are supposed to handle the scissors, they're hearing what to do, then that it's easier for their brain to access, oh, okay, walk. Instead of running being what is reinforced. So also using simple language. So, you know, sometimes we can get caught up, you know, as parents, we're running out the door and, you know, we're saying something like, okay, come on, let's go. It's time to leave. Get your sweater. Oh, did you go to the bathroom? Go get your shoes and socks on. That is a lot of information for a small child. And so what might actually happen is they do absolutely nothing. They don't do any of those things. Because that was just way too much information. And so breaking things down to be really, really simple instructions, one thing at a time. It's time to go. We're gonna use the bathroom first. Okay, and then the next thing, okay, it's time to get socks. Sometimes even put on your socks and shoes is too much. Like, it's just one thing at a time. Okay, it's time to put socks on. Okay, now let's get shoes. And so making things really simple instructions can be really helpful. Another pitfall that we can get into is just spouting instructions at children while we're busy doing other things, when really children, especially young children, they might have the ability to put their shoes and socks on developmentally, but they might not have the self-control to do it after, a distracted instruction. So being there with them, getting down on their level, making eye contact, doing it with them can be super helpful in getting that cooperation that we're looking for. Yeah, I think sometimes we can, get into the habit of just repeating ourselves and repeating ourselves and repeating ourselves. It's expecting our child to have the self-control to do it without us and to do it independently. And it can be really frustrating for us. And I think it's frustrating for our child, and I think sometimes our children can actually get in patterns of hearing us say things over and over and over again and not doing them. And so really getting into the mindset of intentionality, that it's time to go. We're gonna go put socks on. Yalla, let's do it together. And yeah, having that witness, so that we're doing it together. We're not expecting them to have that self-control, right? That upstairs brain online. So doing that together, saying it once or twice. Hey, in a couple minutes we're gonna go get socks on because it's almost time to go. Okay, now it's time. We're gonna go get socks on. Let's go do that together. So again, you can see how that safety comes into play, that brain development comes into play. How we're saying things is going to land somewhere in their nervous system, right? Is it that togetherness? Is it that, okay, it's time to go get socks on? Or are we yelling it? Are we demanding it? So all these things come into play. So another great concept is connect before you correct. And I believe this is another one of Dr. Dan Siegel's terms, but before we're jumping into discipline and correction, we're taking that time to connect with our child. We've talked about validating, but even just saying, what we're observing. Hey, are you really busy playing? And you're really busy playing with those toys and you really don't want to leave. You're having so much fun. And it's time to leave now. I'm going to help you. We're going to do this together. we're gonna get our socks on, and then we're gonna get our shoes on. So taking that time to connect. So when we're talking about boundaries, so one, consistency is really important. If our child, if we let our child jump on the couch sometimes and not others, that's going to be a really confusing message. And so just being aware of consistency and why our child might be doing something. Is it because that I've let them do that before and haven't stopped them? So that can be a pretty big piece of the puzzle. So also, okay, so a couple things here. We're going to talk about having values that guide our boundaries. A couple things I want to bring up is that boundaries are always our job to hold. They're not our child's job to hold a boundary that we have. And effective boundaries are held with empathy and firmness. And so we can have a firm boundary, and we can hold our boundary, and we can still be kind, and we can still validate emotions and validate our child's experience. So a key way to do that is by acknowledging how they're feeling and then following through with our boundary in a respectful way. So saying, man, I see that you are really angry. You're really having a hard time with this. I can't let you throw toys. Toys aren't for throwing, so I'm going to take the toy and put it away. So I'm acknowledging how they're feeling. I'm acknowledging their anger. I'm acknowledging their experience. And I'm the one that's holding the boundary. I'm not saying, don't throw that toy. Stop throwing the toy. Stop throwing the toy. Stop throwing the toy. I am acknowledging, and then I'm holding the boundary. I'm following through. I'm saying, you're having a really hard time not throwing the toy, so I'm going to put it up now. We'll try again another time.
Is it okay to then offer another activity?
Sure, if that's doable in that moment. What I would try to avoid is distraction. It can be really easy to overutilize distraction as a parenting tool. Not that there's never a place for it, but I think usually we might gravitate towards distraction when we're uncomfortable with their expression of emotion. And so, and maybe not all the time, in the times that I'm thinking through, even in my own parenting, the times where I want to bring in a distraction is when, is when I really just want them to stop. I really just want the emotions to stop. And I'm not saying that's always a bad thing. Sometimes we need a break, and that's fine. But if we're coming with the mindset of, I do want to be a safe place for my child to express emotions, they can express you know, all emotions are okay, not all behavior is okay. And so I'm gonna do my best to regulate myself so that I can be present while they are sharing all of their emotions. And but I'm gonna, if there's behavior that's destructive, that's I kind of like to put it in 3 categories that can be helpful. If there's behavior that's harming people, harming others, harming themselves or harming the environment, then that's behavior that we can help them stop. So we'll get into a little bit more about setting boundaries, but yeah, just to kind of go into your question a little bit more. When we have like habits or patterns of using distraction, it can kind of take over our parenting, and in every situation we're looking for, okay, how do I stop this emotion? How do I make them be okay now? And our job is not to
Make them feel good at every moment.
yes, thank you. Our job is not to make them happy all the time. If our child is happy all the time, that is actually a red flag, because they're human and they need to have a variety of emotions. And if our job is to make our children happy all the time, one, that's impossible. And so that's really stressful. And then we're just running around trying to appease our children. And so that's actually not even necessary. And so it is work to get to become in ourselves okay with their expression of emotion, but it's also really freeing. You can see how it actually brings a lot of freedom to, I don't have to fix this. This, you know, your anger, your sadness, it is okay. And this isn't something that I have to fix. And we can just be okay with that together. So I hope that, yeah, that brings a little bit of clarity to that. Yeah, thanks so much for the question. Okay, and so it's really helpful to understand this, and the font I'm seeing is really small, so it's probably a little hard to see, but if we kind of break up, we'll call it the power paradigm. There is power, like we have power as the bigger person in this relationship with our child or our students. Like we automatically come with that power. And so a power over parents, and the I guess official terms for these parenting styles would be authoritarian, permissive or uninvolved, and then authoritative. And so with a power over or authoritarian parenting style, that parent is looking to dominate. They're looking to be in control. They're oftentimes children's needs or feelings are discounted or ignored. Like I said, there's an emphasis on control. There's also an emphasis on obedience, on first-time obedience, and on fear-based tactics. So using fear as a tool for behavior modification. Where, and I'll just I guess, use my own childhood as an example, but, and like I said, I love my parents, and we've had many conversations about these things as adults. But my dad had the belief that we wouldn't, no one would listen unless he yelled. And so if you look at yelling in particular, it's really coming from this place of, and it might not be a conscious thought, but it's coming from this place where I feel out of control and I need to get control back. Yelling produces fear that then produces that obedience that I'm looking for and that control over the situation. So, yeah, some other tools besides yelling might be shaming or punishments. So this comes from our insecurity as parents and caregivers. And because we're insecure in our power, we're trying to prove our authority, and we're trying to maintain control and hold on to control, hold on to power. Because we're afraid that that our child will take it from us. The power under or permissive parenting is so the parent actually abdicates their leadership or gives away the authority that they have to their child. They don't have clear boundaries. They aren't able to hold boundaries. They go to avoidance and avoiding following through on what they've said. And they kind of just allow anything to go. Anything goes. And like I said, they give their authority and their control to their child. And again, this is coming from a place of insecurity as well. They're insecure and don't feel confident in the authority that they have. And so they let the child lead and let the child make the decisions and make the rules, basically. So the outcome for the power over is children may feel powerless or they might rebel against that control. The outcomes of the power under is children may feel insecure or lack guidance. So this third style is what we're going for. That is the power with. And that is the parent that prioritizes safety, trust, and mutual respect. That's the parent that understands that respect is something that needs to be modeled in order for a child to learn it. And so that power with parenting is going to be focused on not just the behavior, but the why behind the behavior, what's going on for them, what is that, have they flipped their lid? What is their nervous system sensing? Do I know that they just had a really hard day and maybe something happened, or they're overtired, or they haven't eaten. So all these things, the parent is looking to identify in order to understand the behavior, not just focus on behavior modification. So this parent feels confident in their authority. They know that they have authority in this relationship. They have the ability to lead and guide their child. They know that they can handle themselves and handle whatever their child wants to, throw at them that day. And so the outcomes for these children are they feel empowered, secure, and connected. So when we look at values-based boundaries, we define the values for our family or our classroom. And that helps us to know what to say yes to and what to say no to. If we haven't done this, it gets really hard. We can end up saying no to things that are totally, that maybe could be totally fine. And we end up maybe saying no too much, or we can go to that permissiveness where just everything goes. So really being able to hone this down is really important. We don't have time to, I was gonna take a few minutes for you all to just really look and kind of define your values. Maybe I think doing that would be a really good idea. After this session, thinking through what are the values for my classroom, or what are the values for my family, that are gonna help me to be able to set those boundaries and have a clear understanding of what is an easy yes and what's an easy no. So an example of that could be that maybe connection, which I don't even think it's on here, but maybe connection is a value in my family. And it's dinner time, and we're my children, maybe they're watching a show, you know, they're watching a cartoon, and it's dinner time, and I say, like, okay, everyone, like, come sit at the table for dinner. It's time to eat. And my children say, oh, well, let's just watch this while we're eating. Like, let's just bring the food in here and we'll watch our show and we'll eat. Well, maybe for me, because our value is connection, maybe I have to take a minute and say, you know what? That does not align with our values. Because if we're watching a show while we're eating, we're not able to have that connection, and maybe we haven't seen each other all day. And this is really important, that we're able to look in each other's eyes and have a conversation and connect after a day where, you know, maybe they've been at school or we've been, you know, gone our separate ways, or even maybe I've been with the kids, but my husband is, you know, he's come home, and we've all talked about how connection is important. And so no, like, we haven't seen dad all day, we're gonna sit down as a family and we'll, you know, finish the show tomorrow or whatever it might be. So that's just kind of an example of how these values can play into what we're saying yes to and what we're saying no to. So let's see, where are we at with time? Let me see where. Okay, so we're good. Let's just take a minute and consider these different scenarios and talk through how we can set and hold a boundary in this situation. And I tried to think of examples that were relevant that happened. So, okay, the first one. So we're at the grocery store, and you're at the grocery store and your child is running around pulling things off the shelf. How do how are we gonna go about setting a boundary and holding a boundary in that moment? Any thoughts?
How do you face that situation, yeah?
Okay,
But I think maybe first, talk to the store manager and polish up, yes. Maybe that's first, and ask them for a minute to talk to the child or minor child and put things straight maybe. Maybe that's
yeah,
I don't know, I'm trying to fix that situation.
okay. And maybe it's not, maybe we'll tone it down a little bit. Maybe it's just that our child really wants this candy bar and they're taking it off the shelf and they're saying this, I want this and we're gonna get it. And so there's maybe yeah, in that kind of situation where there's something that maybe we've decided we're not doing that today, we're not getting that today, that's not an option for today. Or if there's another scenario that you guys can think of that's happened, how do you, and I loved what you said too, right? You're saying, okay, and this seems like it's coming from a calm place, like, I am really sorry to the store owner. You're going to your child. Any other ideas of how we would handle that situation? We've talked about empathy and holding the boundary with kindness. Talked about communicating with clarity. Any ideas?
No, I say we can buy everything, like, so. We're going to commit them,
Yeah,
yeah, until now it works, so.
yeah, yeah. And that's a great, I love it. That's perfect. It's simple. We can't buy everything that we want. We came here for our groceries and we're gonna put it back. Absolutely.
My 5-year-old would understand that, my 2-year-old, no way. So
Yeah.
I'm screaming, "Rah, rah, rah," until, we're out of the store, but if you want to eat them.
Yeah,
My son be like, okay, he'd be sad, but he'd sit.
okay, yep, and that makes sense for that 3-year-old that has not learned any of that impulse control or emotion regulation.
Depends maybe age of the child. Depends on you can talk, communicate with me. Maybe I can talk to them when hands.
Yeah,
But my 2-year-old, we can't, she's not gonna understand it. Yeah, she's not gonna take, I feel like her age is a bit more difficult to deal with than. A little bit, I don't know, but like with what I'm experiencing.
yeah,
That harder to go through, deal with her emotions.
well,
In a
and
way.
yeah, and I wonder, is the reason that it's harder because she has more of them?
Mhm.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but also it's more difficult to talk with them.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're not able to reason. They're not able to access the reasoning. And so I think what I want to point out is that, because we're kind of trying to like bring these 3 segments together. So we have this understanding of their brain. We have this understanding of their nervous system. And now we're in the moment and we are trying to set and hold boundaries. And you're right, they can't hear anything we're saying. They can't hear reasoning and logic. And so, but one thing that even if we think, oh, their language isn't there yet, they actually do understand a lot more than we give them credit for. And so one tool that we can use is that name it to tame it. And so that also plays into the validating feelings and then holding the boundary. And so, whew, you're really angry and you really want this chocolate. I'm gonna go ahead and take that because we're not getting it right now. And we're gonna finish grocery shopping. And so I think exactly what you said, right? You don't have to make this big explanation and try to get them to understand our point of view. They want the chocolate and we won't let them have the chocolate.
So while they're having a tantrum, do you just let them be, or?
So I would say, it depends on the situation. And I know there's also, cultural dynamics to consider. If I can figure out how to regulate myself and be okay with their emotions, then, and they're in the cart, I've now put them in the cart because they keep going back to that candy bar and taking it off the shelf, and I've already said that we're not getting it. So they're in the cart, but I still need to get the groceries, like I still need to check out. And so I'm gonna do my best to regulate myself, to communicate those cues of safety, to finish the grocery shopping and check out, because that's what needs to happen. And I have 2 kids while I'm doing it, and this is real life. And so, you know, I think I just need to think through, like, am I okay with whatever it is that I think other people are thinking? And yeah, can I be this safe place for my child right now when they're really upset? And this is what we're needing to do. I think there can be times where we take a minute, maybe we go outside, maybe we go back to the car. Sometimes that's not doable though. Sometimes we just need to get the grocery shopping done. And if my job isn't to control my child's emotions or make them happy all the time, then I don't need to worry about that. And we can continue with what we need to do. Does that make sense? I know it's easier said than done. But do you guys have any other thoughts, or does that feel doable? Yeah. Okay. We are at 3 minutes left, just a few minutes left, and I want to make sure that I honor your time, but we kind of talked about a TV type situation. You know, it's almost time for dinner and your child is screaming. Is it just me, or is the moment when you're cooking dinner, the exact moment where chaos ensues and like they're all of a sudden starving and all of a sudden can't wait another second to have food? And you know, I know this happens for me. I am trying to get the food ready, and like sometimes, yeah, physically my child is hanging on me. So in this particular situation, demanding cookies, but we're about to eat dinner. And so that same type of response, that being able to turn inward, regulate my system so that I can communicate that safety for my child, validate what they're feeling, name it for them, brings down the intensity a little bit. It's not gonna solve emotions, and that's not our goal anyways. But bring down the intensity. And we're gonna say, I'm gonna say, based on my values, we're not having cookies right now. Dinner's about to be ready and I need to make it. And I hear you. I hear that you're really upset and you really want cookies. That's not an option right now. And so, maybe I give them a couple choices of something to do. Maybe I include them in the cooking of dinner. There can be, some creative problem solving. But holding that boundary that, no, that's not what we're doing. If that's something that is important to me. So any questions? I know we've 2 hours of a lot of information, and I hope that there were some practical things that you can take with you. And maybe just, changing patterns and habits takes just one small step at a time. And so if we set our goals too high, or too many goals, then we end up not doing any of them. So maybe just picking one thing that you feel like would be helpful, just one thing to try this week, and see how it goes. And yeah, something that's super doable, just one. So yeah, feel free to let me know if you have any questions. We'll go ahead and wrap up so that if you have families to get home to, you can do that. But thank you all so much for coming. It was, yeah, it was such a gift to get to know you guys a little bit and to get to know Casamia. So thank you all. Do you want me to end the